Well, good morning, everyone. Happy summer. For a lot of us, this is the first weekend of summer. A bunch of schools are out or will be out this week, and our family's really been enjoying this nice weather. We've, kind of just put the bedtimes aside and have been experiencing long days and hanging out in the neighborhood. And so when we finally get to the kids in bed at the end of the day, we're exhausted. And Brad and I just like to sit on our front porch and sort of unwind. And I have this bad habit where I'll just sit there and scroll through my phone. And inevitably, as I'm scrolling, I'll just start laughing out loud. And of course, Brad's like, what are you laughing at? And so I'll read him some funny tweets or some memes that he may or may not think are funny, but I think are funny because there is a stranger out there on the internet who gets me. Like this one, for example. When you finally feel good about yourself and somebody says you look tired. I know. So if I look tired, please do not tell me that today. I don't know why people have this urge to always tell someone that they look tired. Or I laughed at this one too. It says, I would do absolutely anything to get 8 hours of sleep, except for going to bed 8 hours before I need to wake up. This one made me feel so seen because I always want more sleep, but I always stay up late. We laugh at these things because it feels good to know that there's someone who relates to our experience. It's like we have this moment of solidarity with them. We love being known and seen. That's why when you discover that someone you're talking to watches that same obscure Netflix show that you watch, you feel this instant connection. And even if you're not friends, you start deep diving on details and conspiracy theories, and you just have this whole big connection. Or it's why we get really excited when we're out somewhere and we meet someone who's from our hometown that's 10 hours away, because they actually understand what it's like to grow up there. We love to feel understood. And we go about our days and our weeks, and we have these moments of solidarity where we feel seen just in daily life. For me, when I'm with someone and they can't find their debit card or their keys, I'm like, I get you. Because if you're the type of person who takes your debit card out of your wallet and keeps it in your pocket or on the front seat of your car, we can be friends. I feel a connection with you. Thank God for Apple Pay, right? Or, I also love when I'm sitting in a meeting and someone shares their screen and they have like 100 tabs open on their browser. I'm like, yes, you get me. Like, that is definitely the most efficient way to work. Or I have a moment of solidarity in our town when I'm taking a walk and there's tons of street parking, and I'll see this poor person who is just struggling to parallel park. Like it's their 4th or 5th time trying to get into the spot, and there's a line full of angry cars behind them. And I just want to go up to their window and be like, I get you. You don't have to be stressed. I know it feels terrible. Just ignore all those angry people. And it doesn't even matter if you make it inside of the white lines. There's that moment of understanding because I am a terrible parallel parker. We love to feel understood. And when we see people who struggle with the same things that we do, we just feel a little bit more normal, don't we? And if that's true with these insignificant things in life, how much more true is that with the significant things in life? Like when you're going through a devastating breakup and someone sits with you who's been through the exact same thing, they can give you hope that you will come out on the other side and make it okay. Or when your child's just been given a diagnosis and you're really struggling, there is something so powerful about connecting with other parents whose child has that same diagnosis, because they can offer you a counsel that is unique and understanding. Or when you're dealing with caring for aging parents, and you have a conversation with someone who's going through the exact same thing, they're able to offer you this unique perspective that helps you feel a lot less guilty for the struggle that you're facing. Or when you're walking with the weight of grief and you talk to someone else who's suffered the same unimaginable loss, there's comfort in that moment because you feel so understood. The power of solidarity is that it reminds us that we are not alone, but it also gives us the confidence to move forward. But so often, instead of the power of solidarity, we live in this pain of isolation. Because we all came in here with needs today. We all have something going on in our life right at this moment that we have no clue how to navigate. It feels so overwhelming. It makes us feel afraid and helpless. In so many ways, it seems so big and impossible. We have relationships that are broken and messy. We need physical healing. We're unable to forgive. We have this crippling anxiety or depression. We're disappointed by our own failures. We have this regret of the past and a fear of the future. And the more we live inside of these places, we allow this pain to become the center point of our lives, and we hold on to it. And as we do that, we start building up walls, and we start pushing people away, because inside of those places is where we convince ourselves, like, no one else can understand this. They don't get this. They've never walked through this. And we feel completely alone. But the more alone we feel, the more alone we keep ourselves. It's the great irony. The deeper the pain, the deeper the isolation. But in these moments of struggle or temptation, it's not just people we feel distant from. It's not just people we push away, but we also do that with God. Because in these moments, it feels like he's nowhere to be found, like we've called out to him and we don't hear him responding. It's in the pain of isolation that we are tempted to give up on God, because we see that he has given up on us. We believe that he's given up on us. I don't know what you came in here with today. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what questions you're asking, what struggle you're facing, what you're wrestling with. But I do know that there is a truth that we can all stand on. You are not alone. Jesus understands, and he can help. Our longing to be known, to be understood, and to be seen, to have someone stand in complete solidarity with us, can only fully and forever be met in Jesus, our great high priest. So that's why today we are picking up our study of Hebrews at the end of chapter 4. And we're going to spend a few minutes and just a few verses. And I believe that these verses are some of the most comforting verses in the entire Bible. Listen to what the author of Hebrews says. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And so remember, the book of Hebrews is actually a letter written to Jewish Christians who were tempted to give up on their faith. And they were definitely in one of those moments of isolation, because they were facing rejection and persecution and doubt, and they didn't know if they could keep the faith. And so that's why in these verses, the author of Hebrews is giving them two commands. He's saying, hold fast, draw near, hold on to Jesus no matter what you're going through. Draw near to him because you have access. But in these seasons of suffering and of pain, what does that look like? How do we have the strength to hold fast to Jesus? How do we have the desire or the confidence to draw near? Well, the author of Hebrews points us back to the same thing that he's been pointing us back to, because on either side of those commands is an anchoring verse about Jesus. And so if we're going to hold fast or we're going to draw near, then we have to anchor ourselves in the truth of who Jesus is. We see the same theme that we've been seeing as we've been studying this book of Hebrews, that the secret to steadfast endurance, the secret to holding fast, is to replace trying harder with looking closer. And specifically in this case, when we look more closely at Jesus, we see that he is a great high priest who stands with us in solidarity. And this totally just changes the way we approach God, because we don't have to be ashamed. We don't have to push him away. We don't have to feel alone. Because Jesus understands our weakness, we can draw near to him with confidence. And so as we think about this idea of a great high priest, this would be something that the original audience was really familiar with, because the high priest was the center point of their Levitical system. They grew up knowing they needed a high priest. And so they had this paradigm of how they were to relate to God. The first thing they knew is that sin separates. They knew that their sin would keep them from God, that they could never have access to him because they could not keep his law, and he was holy. And then they knew that they needed a mediator then to give them access. Since they couldn't approach God, they needed someone to be their representative and to approach him on their behalf. And they also knew that forgiveness is costly, that without the shedding of blood, there could be no forgiveness of sins. And because their sin separated them from a God who had wrath against sin, they needed some form of atonement, a sacrifice to make them one with God again. And so every year on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would make a sacrifice for his own sins, and then he would make a sacrifice for the sins of the people, and he would take that blood and bring it into the most holy place so that they could have forgiveness, and it was costly. And so these Jewish Christians, they were well aware that they needed a high priest. They didn't need to be convinced of that. And even though we don't see this in our daily reality, we don't have a system of sacrifices and a mediator, we have the same paradigm for relating to God. Because our sin separates us from God. He is a holy God, and we cannot approach him confidently. And so in that case, we need a mediator to give us access. We need someone to be a bridge between us and God and to plead our case to him. We need someone who understands. And for us too, forgiveness is costly. The wages of sin is death. There needs to be a sacrifice on our behalf so that we can be one with God. In other words, we need a high priest. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that no one here has had an animal sacrificed for their sins, right? And we don't look for someone to be our mediator and tell them what we need and then have them go to God for us. In fact, if we're honest, many of us don't even understand what a high priest even is. We don't have that kind of knowledge of the Old Testament. But thankfully, the author of Hebrews, he has our back, and he gives us a really quick summary of the job descriptions and qualifications of a high priest in Hebrews chapter 5 at the beginning. Look what he says. For every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. Because of this, he is obligated to offer sacrifice for his own sins, just as he does for those of the people. And no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So in this, we see two qualifications for a high priest. First, the high priest was divinely appointed, that they had to be called by God to be a high priest. This wasn't something that you put your hand up for or ran in an election for. It was something that God chose, an office that God put someone in. And the second qualification is that they would need to be a sympathetic mediator, which means they had to be chosen from among the people so that they could represent them well. And as we read in that verse, deal gently with them, have compassion for them, because this person, this high priest, could relate to their weakness. And so do you begin to see how the author of Hebrews connects the dots? That Jesus was divinely appointed and is a sympathetic mediator. So he then is the high priest that we need. Look at what the author of Hebrews says. Since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. And so Jesus wasn't just a high priest. He was the great high priest because he didn't enter the presence of God once a year. He didn't have to go into the Holy of Holies. He passed through the heavens. Hebrews 1 says that he is seated at the right hand of God, which means he is forever in God's presence, making intercession for us. He was divinely appointed. He was chosen by God, not just chosen by God, but a son of God. He's the perfect priest who never had to make a sacrifice for his own sins. But he was the perfect sacrifice, dying once and for all. And so we see these things about Jesus and understand that he was divinely appointed. But when we think of him seated at the right hand of God or passing through the heavens, it might seem like he's distant or detached, just like this divinity that we have no access to. But that's the crazy part about these verses, because he isn't just divinely appointed. He is also a sympathetic mediator, because he was made like us in every way. He can fully understand our weakness. So he's not distant or detached, but he is standing with us, fully sympathizing with us in complete solidarity. The other night, we were tucking our kids into bed, and my daughter Mila said, "Mommy, can I talk to you for a couple minutes?" I said, sure, sweetie, what's going on? And she said, oh, and then she just started to cry. I'm feeling really alone. And she went on to tell me about a situation with a group of girls that she was struggling with, and she was just feeling so isolated and rejected and not good enough to be a part of this group. And as she was crying and her heart was breaking, my heart was breaking with her because I could sympathize with her. I know what it's like all too well to be left out of a group of girls. I think every woman on the planet can sympathize with that. And so I felt that pain with her. But even more than that, she's my sweet baby girl. When she suffers, I suffer. I felt that pain as though it was my own because I love her so much and I enter into that with her. With Jesus, it's even deeper than that. When we're pained, he's pained. When we suffer, he feels that suffering as though it was his own, even though it isn't. And beyond that, he can sympathize with our experience. He knows what it's like to suffer. He is well acquainted with grief. He understands what it's like to be rejected and mocked and abandoned. He knows what it's like to have everyone desert you in your darkest hour. He knows what it's like to beg God for a different way, to wish that life didn't have to be so difficult. That's why the truth in Hebrews 4:15 is so important. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. The word sympathize in these verses is so much stronger than our English word for sympathize because it actually means to co-suffer or to suffer with. So we are not alone in our weakness, in our pain, in our suffering, but Jesus is walking with us closer than ever. He's not just sympathizing from afar, but he is standing in complete solidarity with us. That night that I was talking to Mila, we wrapped up our conversation, and what she didn't know is that I felt extra sympathetic to her in that moment because I had been dealing with my own feelings of rejection from a different situation. And as we wrapped up our conversation, she said, Mommy, wait a second, I gotta show you something. And so she ran upstairs and she got her journal. And she gave me permission to share this today because this truth ministered to me so much in this moment. And so look at what she wrote. When I get sad, God is sad with me. I know that's ridiculously simple, but sometimes the simplest truths are the most profound. And this one is earth-shattering even. This is the witness of Jesus, God with us, that he sees us in our suffering and he joins us there, that you are not alone. So maybe you need to hear that today. Jesus is sad with you. When it feels like everything is falling apart, when it feels like all hope has been lost, when you feel like you will never be good enough or you will always be too much, when the evil and the brokenness of our world is just too much to bear, when you're not sure if you can live another day, you are not alone. You have a friend who completely understands your suffering, and he crawls into that pit with you, and he puts his arm around you and embraces you, and he is standing with you in complete solidarity. When it feels like no one understands, Jesus does. This is the good news of the gospel. This is why our faith is worth holding fast to. Because we don't have a God who is removed from our suffering and pain. We don't have a God who is above suffering. We don't have a God who looks down at our suffering and feels bad for us. No, we have a God who sees us in our suffering and our pain and who joins us there. Our high priest is able to sympathize. That's such an incredible truth. But equally as incredible is the second half of that verse, is that Jesus was tempted in every way, just as we are, but was without sin. So Jesus understands the magnitude and the weight of every single temptation we face. And a lot of times I think we hear that and we kind of glaze over it or dismiss it because we think, well, okay, Jesus was the Son of God. He was tempted, but he never gave in. How can he really understand what temptation feels like? Like he was perfect. Was it even that hard for him? Listen to how C.S. Lewis answers this question. He said, a silly idea is current that good people do not know what temptation means. This is an obvious lie. Only those who try to resist temptation know how strong it is. A man who gives into temptation after 5 minutes simply does not know what it would have been like an hour later. That is why bad people, in one sense, know very little about badness. They have lived a sheltered life by always giving in. Christ, because he was the only man who never yielded to temptation, is also the only man who knows to the full what temptation means. The only complete realist. So do you see what he's saying? That Jesus actually understands the full comprehensive weight and pain of temptation more than any of us, because it came at him again and again and again, and he withstood it every time. So he is able to sympathize with our struggle more than we can even know. But in our places of temptation, that's where we feel the most shame. And the shame blinds us to the sympathy that Jesus feels with us, because we have this idea that Jesus is up there, just rolling his eyes and being like, ugh, of course they messed up again. Like, why can't you just get it together? How hard is it? Why do you keep giving in? You should be better than this. Just try a little harder. Why can't you just get a handle on your drinking? Why is it so hard to stop flirting with that person who isn't your spouse? Come on. Why can't you just tell your boss the truth? Don't give in to this temptation. But that's shame speaking. That is not at all what Jesus is saying. Because we have a sympathetic high priest who goes before God on our behalf. Because Jesus understands the weight of temptation. He understands how hard it really is. He's not amazed that you're giving in. He knows what it's like to be there. And because he understands that weight of temptation, he also can provide a way out of that temptation. Remember what the author of Hebrews said back in chapter 2. Therefore, he, speaking of Jesus, had to be made like his brothers. There's that sympathetic nature in every respect, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Notice what this verse doesn't say. It doesn't say that because Jesus suffered when tempted, that he's disgusted when you're tempted. It doesn't say that Jesus shames you for being tempted or that he's angry at you for being tempted. No, because Jesus suffered when tempted, he is able to help you when you're tempted. So in the midst of temptation, in the midst of the great struggle that you face, Jesus doesn't want you to feel ashamed. He doesn't want you to hide from him, but to run to him. It's because Jesus understands our weakness that we can draw near to him with confidence. Our son Judah, he just turned 4, and he is a firecracker. I've said from here before that we call him our spicy little pepper because he is cute, but he is fiery. We never know what he is going to do or what he is going to say, and he is always fully confident. Like, he never looks back. He is always 100% in, so much so that it even has like physical manifestation in his body. Lately, he's been doing this thing where he smiles, and he smiles with all teeth and no eyes because it's just like so welled up in his being. There he is. He's a cutie, and it's a good thing. And so last week we were worshiping in Swickley Valley, and our family attended the 9 o'clock service, and we were kind of mingling in the lobby afterward, and the 11 o'clock service had started, and I'm trying to keep an eye on my kids and still talk to people, and the sanctuary doors were still open at that point. And my kids could see my husband, Brad, up on stage leading worship. So they were kind of looking at him, and Judah said, "Look, Mommy, I see Daddy leading worship." I was like, "Yeah, buddy, that's great." And I went back to talking, and a couple minutes later, out of my periphery, I'm kind of doing the head count, and I see Mila, Seth, Shiloh, you guessed it, little Judah is nowhere to be found. And no sooner did I realize that, and I look up, and through the sanctuary doors, I see joyful Judah half skipping, half dancing, half running his way between the aisles, making his way up toward the stage. And I don't know what got in his mind at that moment, but he just thought that he could confidently enter that sanctuary and have complete access to Brad. Guys, this is my life. Like, come on, buddy. So there I am, the pastor's wife, just like trucking it through the aisles, snagging him before he gets up on stage. And I got him, and I brought him out, and I'm like, "Buddy, like, church is going on. What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, Mommy, I always like to sing with Daddy." He was so confident in his position as a son. It didn't matter where his dad was. He knows that he has access to him at any time, whether he's singing music at home or singing music on a stage. And so he approached him fully and confidently and joyfully with everything that he is. This is the picture that the author of Hebrews is giving us as to how we are to draw near to the throne of grace. Listen to what he said. "Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." This is how we're to come into the presence of God. These words for drawing near, they evoke this imagery of worshipers coming into a sanctuary. They're also used other places in Scripture to describe the high priest drawing near and coming into the Holy of Holies, entering God's presence. And so because of the finished work of Jesus on the cross, these words can be true of us as well. We can draw near confidently. We get to now, on this side of the cross, experience his power and his glory firsthand. We can come to a throne of grace. Just think about that image for a moment. There's a throne whose very essence is grace, and we're invited there, and we do that through prayer. And prayer is an invitation to replace isolation with intimacy. There's someone who completely understands everything you're walking through, who can completely and fully sympathize with you, who's ready to stand beside you in solidarity. But you have to draw near. You have to pray. You have to approach the throne of grace. Because there, at that throne, you can experience his presence and have true intimacy with Jesus and know that he is walking with you. And so in these verses, in just a sentence, the author gives us 4 ways that we can draw near to God in prayer. And the first one is to pray continually. The translation of draw near in the literal words actually means to draw near continually, to keep drawing near. That means we're to be in God's presence when we wash the dishes, and when we sit in our cubicle, and we take a walk. And when we draw near continually, when we're always in prayer, do you know what that does? It pushes back the isolation. It reminds us that we're never alone. That's the power of drawing near continually. The second thing, the way we're supposed to pray, is to pray confidently. This isn't a throne of judgment. We're not drawing near to a throne of performance. We don't have to get everything together so we can come before the Lord. We draw near confidently because of what our mediator, our great high priest, has done on our behalf. And the identity we now have as sons and daughters of God. Because of Jesus, we can come confidently. This would have been mind-blowing to the original readers because, remember, they have that whole sacrificial system in mind. And so when they think of approaching God, they think that's off limits. And there was a physical symbol of that. In the temple, there was a curtain that separated the Holy of Holies where God's presence dwelt and the people. But the hour that Jesus died on that cross, that curtain was torn in two. There's no more barriers between the people and God. And so whatever it is that is keeping you from praying confidently, from praying big, bold prayers, from knowing that you are wanted and welcomed, whether it's fear or doubt or insecurity or some stronghold that you have, that was destroyed and torn in two at the cross. You can come fully knowing that your worth has been determined at the cross. So come confidently, just like little Judah running up to the sanctuary. Pray continually, pray confidently, pray truthfully. One of the greatest parts about having a sympathetic mediator in Jesus is that we don't have to fake it. Like a lot of times to pray, we think we have to have the right words or get it together or tell God what he wants to hear. But we have a high priest who completely understands our weakness. If you want to revolutionize your prayer life, start being honest with God. Let him into the dark places and the confusing places and the hard places. Come before him truthfully. The author of Hebrews shows us that Jesus modeled this for us. He said, in the days of flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Sometimes prayer looks like loud cries and tears. Sometimes prayer looks like going to God and saying, I can't reconcile the truth of your goodness with a classroom full of dead children. Sometimes prayer looks like going to God just completely angry and saying, God, I have begged you for healing. I have asked for a child. I have asked for a breakthrough in this relationship, and I still don't have it. Like I'm ready to give up. And sometimes prayer looks like going to God and saying, I don't even know if I believe in you. And I don't even know if prayer works or I feel like praying. But I'm going to be honest about that. And when we go to God truthfully, honestly, that's when we experience that true intimacy because our soul is naked before him and we invite him into those places and we feel his presence. Pray continually, pray confidently, pray truthfully, and pray expectantly. What does the Bible say? That when we come to the throne of grace, not that we might find a little bit of mercy, that if it's a good day and we've performed well, that we might get some of God's grace. No, when we come to the throne of grace with confidence, we will receive mercy and find grace to help in our time of need. Whatever you're going through today, just go to the throne with open arms and say, God, I know you're rich in mercy. I'm ready to receive that. God, I know that you are rich in grace, that you will pour your favor out on me, that you remind me that I am loved and that I am your child, and that you will give me the strength to hold fast and to draw near, even when it feels like I can't. So pray continually, pray confidently, pray truthfully, pray expectantly, and experience the power of being in the presence of Jesus. You are not alone. Jesus understands exactly what you're going through, and he can help. He has mercy and grace just waiting for you. But you have to draw near. And so right now we're just going to create a little bit of space to do just that wherever you're participating today. Would you accept the invitation to draw near to the throne of grace? To just take these next few minutes as a song is played over you. Come before the Lord. Maybe you need to be honest. Maybe you need to pray with the person next to you. Maybe you need to get on your knees and kneel and just be amazed that there is a throne of grace that you are invited to and that you have access to the God of the universe who upholds this world by just a word of his power. And so over these next few moments, let's just draw near. So God, we thank you for the privilege of being in your presence. And God, right now, I just have this image of whatever barrier is separating us from you. God, whether it's our own doubts or lies that we're believing or strongholds that have a grip on us, that we will see that you are tearing those in two, that work was finished on the cross. And God, I pray for every single person who can hear the sound of my voice, that as they draw near in this very moment with open arms, they would receive mercy and grace to help in their time of need. Jesus, thank you for being our great high priest. We love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.